perfectly okay, the heart started again, the brain started, no problem at all. He walked home. He said the only unfortunate part of the whole incident, the only unpleasant part, was the scolding he got from his wife. Don't ever do that again. But the important part of this story, where I always tell people, I asked that man, at that time, what were you feeling? He said, the most immense power and bliss. His mind was unified in samadhi, incredible happiness, the best happiness he'd ever felt in his life, and the best power too. Number two, how did you do that? And his answer was the common answer to other people who've experienced those states. He said, for the first time in my life, I really let go. Really let go. And that's what happens. When you let go of this control, of this active part of the mind called craving, and you really let it go, you just give up control, energy just flows into the knower, into the pure mind which just knows things. Everything gets very, very still, the energy builds up, and my goodness, that is power. If any of you have even touched those deep states, sometimes the power is frightening. Many people get to the edge of those deep meditations and think this is too much for me. Too much bliss, too much power. It's a very common obstacle. And I keep having to tell my students, keep on going. There's nothing to be afraid of, but everything to gain. To see actually what this mind is capable of. And if you can actually taste that degree of power, you can understand why there is such things as psychic powers, how people can read minds, how they can do other things like go through the air. They usually keep this quiet, but also how you can really penetrate the nature of existence with such an incredible, powerful mind. You can also understand why there are some monks and nuns around who have that power. And my goodness, you feel it when they're around. That is a powerful person. The mind power is huge. As human beings, they say we only use 1/10 of our brain. My goodness, most people don't even use that much. But the power of our mind is basically just unused. We waste it on too much thinking, too much worrying. We never concentrate it and put it in the right place and make use of this. The Buddha said it's like an elephant which is in the jungle and just runs around, compared to an elephant which is trained and can move the most heavy of logs. When your mind is well trained, it has enormous power. And that power can be used out of compassion for others to teach them, even to sometimes help heal their diseases. Focusing that power on others can help them, or focusing that power on your own diseases can help.
Ajahn Brahm, does compassion and wisdom arise naturally from meditation?
Does compassion and wisdom arise naturally from meditation? My goodness, they arise just so powerfully from deep meditation. You know, the first time I got into a deep meditation, I was still a lay person. The effect of that bliss was wanting to try and get to that teacher's feet and just kiss them all over. The amount of compassion and power you have is enormous after deep meditation. As I say afterwards, you just can zap somebody and they can feel it. I did that once when I was to the south of Perth in the town called Bunbury. I was teaching in a prison that afternoon. And that evening I had a free afternoon, so I went to the beach to meditate. It was free, there was nobody there except this boy and girl. They were just walking past me. And I sat down there, I got into deep meditation. I did this wonderful loving kindness, compassion meditation. I must have been meditating for an hour. When I opened my eyes, that boy and girl were still there. They're involved in it's not compassionate, but passionate embrace. I realised my compassion was a bit too strong. But yeah, it does work. You can have great compassion there.
Could you adjust your mic up?
Okay, yes.
If wisdom nationalizes from meditation, then would it be correct to say, then why read Dhamma books? Because the wisdom is going to arise naturally anyway.
Correct. Wisdom arises from meditation. You read the Dhamma books actually to get into your meditation. Just the same way you read the menu in a restaurant to order the food. But you don't stop with a menu and eat that. Too often these days people eat the books. You understand what I mean by eating the books? How much do you really need to know? Sometimes I get very disappointed with the Buddhist fellowship. I've been teaching these things time after time after time. Don't you know already? All these times a good teacher always tries to get rid of their disciples. I must be a bad teacher because I keep getting more disciples. What I mean is, if you're a teacher at school and your class keeps coming back year after year after year after year, always a terrible teacher. You want to get rid of people. So you're enlightened. You know exactly what to do.
We're just slow.
Yeah.
But we're persevering.
So when you actually read something, find out what it means and practice it. When you read the menu, find out what you want, order the meal and eat it. So you don't keep the menu all the time. So too much trouble with Buddhism. It's all in the head, ideas which no one ever practices. And we can actually we can become doctors of Buddhism. We can become professors of Buddhism and have no idea what Buddhism is. We know all the words, we know all the theory, but we never actually put it into practice. And if you see someone putting it into practice, like, again, I can't say anything better than my teacher, Ajahn Chah. He'd only completed 4 years of primary school. He was way, way wiser than me. I mean, he's the wisest person I've ever met. He's the one who said, "No, don't disturb the noise. It's not the noise disturbing you, you're disturbing the noise." That's powerfully deep. He was the one who said that he made a prediction. He said in the future about money. He said in the future we'd run out of paper, for banknotes. We'd run out of metal for coins. He said, so in the future, people will use chicken shit for money. And they fill their pockets with chicken shit and they worry about how much chicken shit they got in the bank. And people would rob to steal the chicken shit from your house. And our governments would be worried about the chicken shit situation in the country before they do anything. But what's the difference between chicken pellets and money? This was Ajahn Chah's story. He would say there's nothing. So why do we fight over money? It's only paper, it's only stone from the ground, that's all. Can't we keep it in perspective? He really made you think. Unconventional wisdom, but very deep wisdom. That's why it's great being around masters. There's a wisdom which you can check from the Buddha. That was actually what the Buddha would have taught, but in a completely new, original, and entertaining way. Now, that's what wisdom is.
You mentioned about an unhealthy mind is the cause of diseases and problems with your health. But what you read in the papers is often it's your diet. It's just not enough exercise and so on and so forth. It's genetic. So how do you reconcile what you're saying or what the Buddha taught and all these other theories?
Well, it's just like me. It's try to go on a diet, but people keep giving me other food. And they keep saying, "This is very delicious, Ajahn Brahm, please eat some of this. I made it specially for you, Ajahn Brahm, you must drink this. And I just brought this all the way from my home, I made it specially." So I have to drink everything and eat everything. So I told my disciples in Perth, I tell you here, my stomach does not belong to me, it belongs to you. You can pour whatever you want into this stomach and I'll be very grateful. That's my diet. And I'm healthy, nothing wrong with me. So it's not so much the diet, it's actually what you think about the diet a lot of the time. It's the mind is the most important thing. I don't know if any of you have heard of the macrobiotic diet, but when I was very young at university, I saw this. It was a Zen diet, and it had these different levels. And it had it's all vegetarian, vegetable food, with soy sauce and brown rice. And then the next level was just brown rice and soy sauce. The second highest level was brown rice, and the highest level of all was anything you want. That was only for enlightened ones. Because it's as if that when your mind is at peace, But the energy of the mind will be able to digest almost anything and still be healthy and well. And when your mind is very powerful, it's amazing what it can do with diseases. If it's karmic, then sometimes you can't do anything about it. But look, there's one of the fellows in my monastery in Perth. He's an old Englishman called George. You won't know him, so I don't mind mentioning his name. It's George. He had cancer of the lungs. Very bad. When he went to see the specialist, the oncologist, they showed him the x-ray. Both lungs were riddled with cancer. He said, look, surgery is not an option. You can't take all the lungs out, both of them. He said, look, we can try chemotherapy, we can try radiation therapy, but to be frank, the best we can reasonably hope for is just to extend your life by a few months. Basically, it's too far gone. He said, go home, talk it over with your wife and your family, come back in 2 weeks, we'll give you another x-ray to see how it's progressed, and you can actually tell me what you want to do. He went back home, talked it over with his family. His decision was, instead of going through the trauma of chemotherapy or radiation therapy, let's just let it take its natural course. He was resigned just to let go and allow himself to die. When they took the second x-ray, the doctor was looking at it in the room when he walked in to tell him of the decision. But the doctor was looking at this new x-ray, shaking his head. And George thought it had got much worse, that he hadn't got months, he'd only got days. So he said, doctor, please tell me straight away. It's got worse, hasn't it? That's why you're shaking your head. And the doctor looked up and said, I'm shaking my head not because it's got worse. I'm shaking my head because it's disappeared. What the heck have you been doing? He showed the two x-rays taken 2 weeks apart. The 2 week before one was full of cancer. The one he'd just taken was completely free. So what have you been doing? George said, meditating, letting go. That was a rare case of cancer going so quickly. It did. There's many cases I've known like that, where through the power of the mind, it's amazing what you can do with the body.
Is meditation unique to Buddhism, or do other traditions or religions also practice meditation?
Is meditation unique to Buddhism? If it's meditation, that's what Buddhism means, meditation. So if anyone meditates, they may call themselves a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu or someone else, but they're practicing the Buddhist path. So Buddhism is not because you go to a temple, it's not because you call yourself a Buddhist, it's what you do. And if you keep precepts, you're compassionate, you develop your meditation, you're generous, then that's what Buddhism is. I mentioned that earlier today, that I read, the reason why I became a Buddhist was I decided to do some market research before I chose my religion. So I read about all the religions. I wanted to choose which one I wanted, just the same as when you choose a car. Toyota, Hyundai, Mercedes, you try and check them out first of all, see what you can afford, see what you like, see what you want to use it for. So I read all these books, and when I read my first book on Buddhism, it didn't convert me. I found out I already was a Buddhist. The way I practiced, the way I thought, my views, they had a name. So Buddhism is not something you believe in. Buddhism describes the way you think, your lifestyle, your views, the way you look at life. And if you're meditating, that comes under that particular thing called Buddhism.
Excuse me, I have a question here. How do you overcome guilt and fear?
How do you overcome guilt and fear? Someone asked that question 2 or 3 days ago when I was in Perth, and I had to translate it for a Thai monk who was visiting, a very great monk with great powers. And I couldn't translate it. I couldn't think of any Thai word for guilt. In many Buddhist countries, there is no word for guilt. They don't have that concept. The point is that guilt is very much a Western concept, which has come into our Singaporean society as well. People usually don't feel, what do you want to feel guilty for? You've done a mistake, you've done something wrong, you acknowledge it, and you make amends. What guilt is wanting to punish yourself because you've done something wrong. In our court of law, guilt is what happens after the judge finds you guilty. The next stage always is the punishment. Guilt and punishment are always related in our psychology. So guilt and punishment go together. There's no reason to feel guilty. If you've done something wrong, don't punish yourself. You should not seek punishment from others either. Forgive yourself. Punishment doesn't help. It just makes more pain. You've created pain, you've done something wrong. Don't add to that pain with punishing people. The Buddhist way, in the Buddha's time, people would actually try and kill the Buddha. And the Buddha never wanted to punish them. He said, okay, acknowledge your fault. Just don't do it again. Off you go. That's a wonderful teaching. I said this last night in the BF Centre. Sometimes it's hard for people to understand that. So in my monastery in Perth, sometimes some of the young members are just joining our monastery. They did something wrong. I tried to forgive them, but they couldn't do it. They wanted a punishment. So I invented this punishment in Australia, in my monastery. It's an Australian punishment because you know that Australia started as a penal colony. They sent convicts over from England and they were very, very cruel. If any of the convicts misbehaved, they would be flogged. They get strokes of the cat. So I decided to keep the Australian tradition, and if any monks misbehaved in my monastery, I gave them 50 strokes of the cat. I did. 50 strokes of the cat. Which in my monastery meant we have a little cat we call Kit Kat. We have to find that cat and stroke it 50 times and learn some compassion. The reason we want punishment is because we haven't got enough compassion. We don't know how to forgive. So I say, go and find a cat, stroke it 50 times. That's called 50 strokes of the cat. And when you've learned how to be compassionate, then you can stroke yourself 50 times. Oh, I made a mistake. Poor me. Try not to do it. That works much better. You learn not from your mistakes, you learn from your successes. You don't learn from your mistakes, you get depressed, discouraged, afraid, guilty by focusing on mistakes. You focus on your successes, you learn from success, you get encouragement, you get happiness, you get energy, you repeat those successes, you forget about the mistakes. So he focuses on successes. And that way, guilt doesn't have a part of it. Because we've got guilt, or that any psychologist here just knows how that keeps people down. They can't enjoy their life, they can't progress because they're caught in the past. There's no way to live a life. So forget about guilt. You made a mistake. Are there anyone here who's never made a mistake in their life? Who's never done anything wrong? If you put your hand up, that's something wrong. We've all made mistakes. Surely we can forgive. The religious teachers, like the Buddha, were compassionate. What does compassion mean? You're forgiven. Sometimes it's an act of forgiveness. People say, before I leave somewhere, it's a tradition, or even in the Buddhist fellowship, they say, if there's anything we've done, Ajahn Brahmavamso, by body, speech, or mind, intentional or unintentional, we ask your forgiveness before you go. And the last time I was here, I said, okay, I give you forgiveness for everything you've done in the past, everything you'll do now, and everything you'll do in the future, so you never have to ask forgiveness ever again. You've got it before you even do it. And you have. Whatever any of you do, I forgive you in the 3 time zones of past, present, and future. You can do whatever you want. When you say that to someone, they only do good things. When you forgive them, you inspire them, you encourage them. And they never do bad things, or very rarely. We do bad things out of fear. It's fear creates the bad things. And then we feel guilty about it, we have more fear of punishment in the future. So the Buddhist way is very powerful, very deep. It's called love, compassion, forgiveness, letting go, generosity, peace. You know the German word for love? Liebe. Connected to liberation, which is freedom. Connected to liberality, which is generosity. All coming from the same place. To really love someone is to free them. Is to give to them. It's Christmas. It's actually a wonderful thing you come here on Christmas, because think how much money you're saving by not going to the shops tonight. But when it is Christmas, even though you may be Buddhist, you give to your loved ones, because that's how we express our love. We give to others. It's just liberality and love, Liebe, same root. And it frees the other. It frees us. When we have someone who loves us, it says we're free. We don't have to prove ourselves to this person. They love us for who we are. It gives us freedom, true love. Imagine we give that to ourselves. We free ourselves from all guilt and all fear if we love ourselves.
Ajahn
If
Brahm,
we're forgiving, yeah.
can meditation help overcome depression? And when would you caution someone not to practice? And when would you caution someone not to practice meditation?
Okay, can meditation overcome depression? Yeah, it certainly can. I used to be depressed. No, I wasn't depressed. Actually, I was depressed once. I remember this occasion when I gave a talk at our centre in Perth. And before I'd gone about 15 minutes, half the people had walked out. And I thought, oh my goodness, I can't give talks anymore. And I thought that I didn't have what it took to give talks. And I thought I'd spend my whole life doing other things. And now look at me. So you can't really judge what you're going to do. Depression is a lack of happiness, a lack of energy. So you find if you do meditate, if you meditate this way, all the energy goes into knowing, you get huge amounts of power and energy. And that power and energy just completely overcome any possibility of depression. Your lack of energy, you know what it's like when you're mentally tired? You've had enough. That's depression, grumpiness. It also manifests as anger. It manifests as being fault-finding to yourself and to others, which is depression, is fault-finding to others. When you have energy inside yourself, you can't get angry. For example, can you remember when you fell in love? Could you get angry when you're in love with someone? Oh, just the whole world was so wonderful. You were so happy. You can't get angry. You couldn't be depressed even if you've got the sack. Who cares? I'm in love. Now you can see what happens when you've got that energy inside of yourself. Nothing can upset you. So if you have the energy for meditation, you just simply don't get depressed. You have energy, you have tolerance. Whatever happens in the world, who cares? I've got this power inside of you to have happiness. Usually things don't go badly anyway, because you've got energy. And that energy, one of the things which I found out, just like Einstein's E equals mc squared, the E, energy, equals happiness. E equals H. Not mc squared, E equals H. Mental energy equals happiness. And the reason why people are depressed, they've got no mental energy. Mentally, they're exhausted, they're tired. If you meditate, you don't get that tiredness, you get brightness of mind. It's incredible what you can actually achieve because your mind is sharp, powerful, and you're happy. That's why when you meditate, the energy just goes into the mind, it builds and builds and builds, you get huge power and huge bliss. The more energy you have in the mind, the more happiness you feel. That's how it goes. So don't get depressed. But the only people we say that they should meditate, there are two types of people who should meditate. One is people who have tendency to schizophrenia. Because sometimes you've got tendencies to schizophrenia, like listening to voices in your head. Sometimes meditation, if you're not careful, can actually amplify those voices. Then you go too internal. So people who have tendencies to schizophrenia, we'd like to get them actually involved in more social work, more outgoing activities, and not go too much inside. However, if you take medication, that you can usually do the meditation, it's no problem at all. You have to be on the medication, be careful. The other type of people, the only other type of people I say don't need to meditate are those who are dead. Other than that, you should meditate.
But how do you know you have a tendency to be a schizophrenia?
I think, how do you know if you're dead or not?
Because will it actually trigger it?
Well, it never triggers it. In all my experience, you've had it there before, and it just amplifies it. It's not a big deal. If you've got a decent teacher who knows the signs, you can actually, you can see that people are going a bit off. And all you do is say, stop meditating now, go do some work, or get some sort of, because there's a chemical imbalance in the brain. It's nothing to do with being possessed or anything. It's just a chemical imbalance, that's all. Get that chemical balance right, you can come meditate again. That's all it really is.
Just to pick up on that gentleman's second part of the question, I think he asked about fear as well.
Fear,
I know that
yeah.
will be addressed on the third talk, but maybe a shorter answer.
Yeah, a fear always comes because you look at the future and you think of all the things which might go wrong. One of the similes, which I think I gave here last time I was here, but it's a great simile, the chicken farmer simile. There was a chicken farmer who got up in the morning to collect what the chickens had done the night before. He went into the shed and he picked up all the chicken shit and left the eggs there to rot. That was a very stupid chicken farmer. The other chicken farmer, the wise one, went into the shed, he left the chicken dung there, and he picked up the eggs. And he took them back to the home. That was a wise chicken farmer. In this simile, sometimes when we look at guilt, which is the opposite of fear, I'll come to fear in a moment, we look at guilt or anger, it's just like the person who collects all the bad stuff which happened today. That's all the thing we remembers. We don't think of all the good stuff which happened today. We think, oh, she said this or he did that. We're like the chicken farmer who just gets the dung and never actually collects any eggs. And fear is just a chicken farmer collecting what's going to happen in the future. Instead of collecting all the wonderful things which are going to happen in the future, the eggs, we just think of all the things which are going to go wrong in the future. And that's called fear. It's a negativity towards the future. So instead of having negativity, positivity. Think, oh, this might happen, I might lose my job, and my relationship might not work out. Or when I come to the Buddhist lodge, I might say something wrong and be banned for the rest of my life. Oh, this terrible thing might happen. But you think, what happens if it doesn't? And it's much more likely it doesn't. So when I look at the future, I always collect the eggs. I never collect the chicken shit. I think of all the things which might go right in the world. When you think of all the things which might go right in the world, all the things which might go right in your life, they're more likely to happen. If you think of all the things which might go wrong, you actually, in very many cases, you're bringing them about. That's why fear, the only thing worthy of being afraid of is fear itself. Throw away fear.
Ajahn Brahm, could you comment on Metta Meditation?
On Metta Meditation, yes. Metta Meditation is actually focusing on just the feeling of love. The feeling of love, the feeling of caring, warmth. Again, it's the same as freedom, liberation, because that's what really love is. It's actually when you forget yourself and give all your energy to another being. But if you're going to do loving kindness meditation, sometimes people start loving kindness on themselves first of all. And because most of us hate ourselves, I'm saying that that's a deep point. If we don't forgive ourselves, we're not at peace with ourselves. That means we have ill will towards ourselves. It's called fear, it's called guilt. We're not at peace. That's why loving kindness should not be done to yourself first of all. It's just too hard. If you're lighting a fire, you start with paper first of all, and then you put on twigs, and then you put on the big wood, and then you put on the logs at the very end, when you've got enough heat there to burn the logs. So with loving kindness meditation, you start with easy things first of all. I imagine a little kitten when I start meditation on loving kindness. This poor kitten, abandoned, lonely, cold, no one to look after it at all in the whole world except me. If I don't look after it, it will die. I start a little conversation like this with myself, with my imaginary kitten. And soon I feel all this warmth coming up. The nurturing, the kindness, the gentleness. Once it starts coming up, it's like lighting the fire with paper. Then I put other people, some of my close friends, real people. And the fire takes those very easily. And then I start with people who are my associates. I don't really like them, I don't dislike them. And last of all, I use my enemies. And these are, actually you don't have enemies after a time, because these are the wet, sappy logs, the people who have hurt you and been cruel to you. When you start putting those on, only when you've got a very strong fire, it dries out those logs, and those logs take the fire as well. You find actually you can love your enemies as well. You don't have enemies anymore. You can actually love them. It's a powerful thing to do that. If people have really been cruel and hurt you, you can actually want them to be happy and well. And that's such a freeing thing. When you have your enemies, this is a story which was in a book recently about these two Australians who were prisoners of war in the Second World War, imprisoned by the Japanese. And the Japanese had done some very cruel things to these Australian prisoners of war. When they met for a reunion, one said to the other, said, "Have you forgiven those Japanese torturers yet?" And the one man said to the other, said, "No, mate, I can never forgive those people. What I saw them do to myself and my friends, I can never forgive them. What about you? Have you forgiven them?" He said, "I forgave them years ago. You, my friend, are still in the POW camp. You, my friend, are still in the POW camp. If you haven't forgiven, you're still in the prison." Do you understand that? That when we have anger, we are still carrying the past. We're still imprisoned. We're not free anymore. If you have an enemy, you have a burden which you're carrying in your heart, which you cannot be free. That's loving kindness meditation. It's incredibly powerful too. It leads to the same places. Huge power, huge happiness. You have loving kindness meditation that even animals know what you're up to. One of the stories in that little book there about the snake. Has anyone ever seen a king cobra in the wild? King cobras, I've only seen one in the wild once in the northeast of Thailand. He was on a path. The path was about 1.5 meters wide, or 1.2 meters, I forget which. I saw this big black shape across the path, thick as your thigh, and it kept moving. Because I was a scientist, I kept measuring it in path widths. That snake was over 10 meters long. I wrote about it in my book, and one of the editors said, "Look, according to the internet, no snakes are that long." I said, "Look, I saw it. I didn't see it on the internet, I saw it in real life." That was a huge snake. In some parts of Thailand, they've got a nickname called the one-step snake. Because when they bite you, you've only got one step before you die. So this is one of the most dangerous of snakes in the Southeast Asian jungles. One of the monks, a very great monk, still alive, lives in Thailand. He visited our monastery some years ago, but this was before he visited our monastery. He was in the jungle meditating with other monks when a king cobra came up to them. They were sitting on the ground, cross-legged. This king cobra came up, right to him, lifted up its head, opened its hood, was this far from his nose. The other monk saw this. What would you do? Don't think of running. Those snakes, I've seen them, it's incredible how fast they could move. What this monk did, he lifted up his right hand and he patted the snake on the head and said, in Thai, "Thank you for visiting me." The other monk saw him do that. Snake doesn't bite people who are kind to them. It's very rare that a snake gets a nice patting on the head. Oh, they like it so much. That same monk, some years later, when he was at our monastery, we were just starting building our monastery. We had the mayor come from the local council to check up on us, to see what we were doing. And at this time, we had asked for building approval for our temple, for our monastery. So he actually came to see us and see what we were doing. And like a mayor, he came in a nice suit. Unfortunately, like many Australians, he was very, very fat. So his belly was actually protruding over his trousers. And he couldn't button up his jacket because it was not big enough. But he had this big belly. And this Thai monk, this was the mayor, an important person. And we were asking for some building permission, so we wanted to try and do the best thing. And before I could stop this Thai monk, he saw this big fat Australian. He went straight for him and started rubbing his stomach. And I thought, oh no, you can't do this to an Australian mayor. I thought we'd never get our planning permission now. We're done for. It's ended. I couldn't stop the guy. But an amazing thing happened. So this mayor, this pillar of the establishment in our community, this very dignified person, started smiling first of all, and then he was giggling, and then he was gurgling like a little baby. He loved every minute of having his stomach rubbed by this Thai monk. And he became one of our best friends in our monasteries and supporters, an Australian mayor. Unfortunately, he died some years ago. I went to his funeral, and it's a confession I make. This is the one time that I was kissed by a girl. Because at his funeral, there was his daughter there. She was a farmer's daughter. And as we sit now, I went to the funeral, and as I went to say my condolences and say thank you for the service, she went to kiss me, because they hug people in Australia just to say thank you. And I said, you're not allowed to do that, I'm a monk. But this was a girl who was used to wrestling sheep. She said, yes, I can. I wasn't quick enough. She trained on sheep, and so I was an easy pushover. I admit, I wasn't quick enough, so okay. It's all in in kindness, that's all. But if you've got that kindness, you can actually pat a cobra on the head. You can also pat mares. And they will love it, but don't you try that.
Could you also give us some advice on meditation on death?
Meditation on death, yeah, that's very, very good. We do this walking meditation, which many of you see, where you walk backwards and forwards, mindfully in the present moment. One of our monks in Australia, he's actually coming here to teach a retreat soon. He used a very common Thai way of meditating when you're walking. As you move your left foot, you say to yourself in your mind, I will die. When you move your right foot, that's for sure. I will die, that's for sure. I will die. That's a great way of meditating. Because at first you think you're being silly. I will die, that's for sure. But you can't blame that. That's true. It's going to happen. I will die, that's for sure. I will die, that's for sure. And what happens, he said, when you're doing this, you keep repeating it to yourself over and over again. It's like the Buddha teaching you a lesson, but over and over again. And then after a while, you say, actually, this is true. You come across fear, first of all. My goodness, that is going to happen to me. Because you're repeating it again and again and again, it actually starts to click some switches in your mind. And when you actually start to click those switches, you get to fear. You have to go through that fear. There's no other choice. And then you start to get life in perspective. You find, yeah, I am going to die, that's for sure. And all of the things you worry about and are concerned about, many of them just aren't really important anymore. What's more important when you know you're going to die is other matters. See my glasses over here? They've already got a crack in them. A microscopic crack which even I can't see. It means that one day these glasses are going to break. They're going to die. But because they're going to die, because they're fragile, that's why I care for these glasses. That's why I look after them. That's why I don't throw them around or step on them. Because they're fragile, that is the reason for caring. It's the same with you and your loved ones. Because you know they're not always going to be there. Because life is fragile. Because you're fragile. That is why we care. If you understand death, straight away compassion becomes so important. To care for each other, to care for life, to care for doing good, because life is so fragile, because we will die. So while we're here, you haven't got any time to get into arguments. You haven't got any time to worry too much about your monetary affairs or who did this, who did that. My goodness, be kind, be compassionate. Make use of your money you have here, the time you have here, the energies. Make the best use of them. So that when you die, you can think, I've lived my life and I've lived a good life. I've really served, I've helped others, I've been a good father, a good mother, a good child, a good husband, a good wife. I looked after the community, I've done my social work for the country, for the nation, for my religion. And then you'll die happy. It actually encourages people to be good when they start meditating on death.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions from the floor? Since it is Tuesday night and we've got 2 more nights to go, I'm sure you will like to be back as well. And yes.
You got a question there? Yes.
You have emphasized a lot meditation. It is supposed related to science, something like a science, related to science, science. My question is that Buddha himself meditated overnight, in the morning he has meditated in the garden, after the garden. Yeah. The point is some people meditate for 20 years. You are saying that that is that one. So how can you reconcile some people meditate for 20 years?
Okay. I think you're asking that sometimes people meditate just overnight and become fully enlightened. Sometimes people meditate for 30 years and they're still nowhere. I think it's sometimes because they don't follow instructions. Have you ever got a computer and turned it on and it goes bang? And then you look at the instructions. Whenever you've got a new computer or a new gizmo, please read the instructions first and then turn it on.
Now we're viruses.
So, and viruses as well, yeah. Sometimes it's because we don't follow the instructions. So if it doesn't work for you, you're not doing it properly. This is one of the things which I found. If you follow the instructions which the Buddha left about how to meditate, it works very, very powerfully, very quickly. The reason why it doesn't work is because people don't follow the instructions. They do it their own way. And they do it their own way, in this way, and that way, and another way. And they find it doesn't work, and they come to me and say, what have you been doing? What do you expect when you've been doing it that way? Like, for example, like when we meditate, you can meditate on a chair. It is fine to meditate on a chair. You don't need to meditate in full lotus on the hard concrete or on glass or whatever else you want. Be kind, be compassionate. Because sometimes people think you can only get enlightened sitting cross-legged on the floor. And I know as a fact that's not true. So where your body is comfortable, so follow those instructions. But people sometimes feel too proud to sit on a chair. They see other people sitting on the floor, so they want to be just the same as them. So I think sometimes it's because people haven't really got the idea about what meditation is, and they don't follow instructions. Yes?
Do you recommend that you do meditation with a guide as a master, or should you practice?
Okay. Do you need a master to meditate? The only real time you need a master when you get into the deep states of meditation, because those are very, very difficult sometimes to understand your way through. But these days we have the internet. Your master can be on the internet, or the master can be in the books. You can have cyber masters. So all the information is very much out there, and we keep writing the information to update it or upgrade it into modern language so people can understand it more fully. So these days, basically, you don't need a master. You've got your books, you've got the internet, and you've got your own experience. If it's leading to peacefulness, it must be the right way. If it leads to more tension, that's not meditation. Make that your teacher.
Before we take the last question, anyone lost your hand phone? All right, last question? Yeah.
I'll ask, we've got two. You have to have a question from Susan. It's tradition. Okay, you're first though.
First, yeah.
Susan, you're second.
How do you remain fully aware and yet be concentrated at the same time?
How do you remain fully aware but
Remain concentrated.
At the same
be
time,
concentrated?
which of it is living in the present moment?
They both go together, because awareness is actually, when the awareness is actually focused and still. That's what concentration means. It's still awareness. But this simile, I've overused this, but it's a great simile. My monastery is 2 kilometers on top of a hill. The reason why we build monasteries on top of a hill, because it's tradition that holy people are supposed to live on top of hills. But actually, somebody told me there was a movie called Star Wars, and their holy person, I think it was called Yoda, lived in a swamp. So it goes against tradition. But most holy people, except Yoda, they live on top of hills. So we built our monastery on top of a hill, and 2 kilometers up that hill, for over 10 years, I'd always go up that hill in a car, in a vehicle. One day I decided to walk up that hill, and the experience was more material for my understanding of meditation. Because when I walked up that hill, the hillside, which I thought I knew well, looked completely different to anything I'd ever seen before. I saw more detail and more beauty. So I stopped. When I stopped walking and stood still, it looked different again. This time it was even more beautiful, more rich in detail. I started to see things I'd never imagined was there. And it was such a striking experience, I thought, what is going on? And I soon understood that when you're looking through the window of a speeding car, your eyes don't have time to register all the details. Images don't have time to form on the retina before you have to move on to something else. And the brain doesn't have time to understand what's going on. That's just with seeing, with hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. You don't have time to see, to know. And I remember that that's actually how I lived most of my life. Most people live their life like going through like in a fast car, looking out the window of their senses. That's why everything is a flash. You don't really understand anything. You don't even understand the person you live with sometimes, because you never stop to really look at them. When I went slower, by walking, my senses had that more time. You saw much more, and what you saw was more beautiful. When you stopped, you had all the time in the world. And that was the time the hillside had most detail, was the most beautiful. That's so good analogy to meditation. When you slow down, your mindfulness starts to increase. You see more, you see deeper, the slower you go. If you can come to a full stop, when the mindfulness is absolutely still, that's when you can see everything. And my goodness, that's beautiful. There's different levels of mindfulness. The ordinary mindfulness of life is so dull. There's power mindfulness, like when you're walking, you're going slow, you see much more. There's what I've called superpower mindfulness. When you're so still, your mindfulness can see so much. And what it sees is invariably incredibly beautiful. It's amazing. Thank you for that question. Does that answer it, or do you want to come back with a counter question? Yes, you do. Okay.
For example, if you are really concentrated on something, then what if you block out other stuff?
Okay, yeah, you're always blocking out other stuff because you can't be mindful of everything. When I'm listening to your question, I'm not listening to anybody else at all. I'm completely focused on you. Mindfulness is always selective. To really empower that mindfulness, you have to focus on one thing. And that makes it really, really powerful. Don't think mindfulness means you have to be mindful of everything, because it's impossible. Mindfulness is always selective. It chooses what's important to you. And sometimes because our mindfulness doesn't stay still long enough, it doesn't build up power and can't see anything at all. Okay, so be mindful of the important things. Okay, Susan.
Okay, good evening.
Yeah.
My question is, unfortunately, a bit long. Maybe you can give a short answer.
No, you've got two sentences. Sum it up, or you're in big trouble.
Where is the mind when a person is... Just now you said point to the mind when we are conscious, like when we are happy.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering that when we are conscious, where is the mind? And when we are asleep, where is the mind? Unconscious, deep coma, where is the mind? Yeah. And when we are asleep, we are dreaming, where is the mind? Are we communicating with any other external spheres?
No.
And is dream any significance?
No, because the body sleeps, so the body is awake, but where is the mind? The mind is, even when you're unconscious, the mind is that potential, which is just waiting there for you to wake up again. But don't look at the mind as being in part of space. You can't locate the mind by giving it coordinates here or there, which is actually why in Buddhism, at the end of the universal cycle, the Buddha remembered 91 eons, and as Professor Epstein, was it UCLA I think he was in, he had this great theory of like these membranes, multidimensional membranes, and when they intersect, that's a big bang, a start of a universe cycle. And there's not parallel universes, but serial universes, which is so close to what Buddhism says. Of many universes, one after the other. When this universe, which you know, finishes, ends, the mind doesn't end. The mind is continuous because it's the universe is in the mind, not the mind in the universe.
But isn't eons the measurement of time?
Eon is a measurement of time, yes. But that time is not part of space. I'll disagree wholeheartedly with Einstein on this, because the time is created by craving. When the mind moves, craving creates time.
So time is imaginary in this case?
It's not imaginary, it's part of the mind, it's real. What is imaginary, people think is not real. But what is imaginary is part of the mind. What you imagine is sometimes more real. Sometimes, for example, people have pain, and the doctor can't find any cause of that pain in the body. And maybe 10 or 15 years ago, people say, you're just imagining that, go home. But these days, the doctors are at least a bit more sensible. It doesn't matter if you're imagining it or not, that is real for you. So they treat the reality for each individual. When you're in love, you do imagine it? It's real for you.
I've never been in love.
Been angry?
Single men around here, apart from Ajahn Brahm, of course. May apply.
I'm the most least romantic
people in love
person.
with me, I do not know.
So this is actually the mind.
Okay.
So the mind is something completely different.
So in this case here, when it's coma, we also cannot locate the mind, or which is...
Sometimes the comas, that the mind is still very much awake, very much alert, but it cannot do anything. That's why, like many comas, and you would know this, I've said this many times before, you may have experienced, a person can't move, they can't speak, they can't react, their doer is absolutely still, but they can know things. Sometimes people come out of a coma, they know exactly who was there, what they said. So if you know anybody in a coma, speak to them, talk to them, hold their hands, stimulate them, because very often they can feel everything which is going on, they can hear everything which is going on. It's just they can't tell you they're still there.
So what's the best thing to say to a person in coma?
The best thing to what?
Say to a person who is in coma.
Tell them jokes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Make them laugh.
Okay,
Speak to them as if they weren't in a coma. Tell them what's happening in life, what this person is doing, that person. Talk to them what they'd like to hear.
Okay, with that, can we put our hands together to thank Ajahn Brahm?
Okay.
On behalf of the Buddhist Fellowship, I also like to record our thanks to the Buddhist Lodge for their kind consent to allow us to use their halls for free. So we're very grateful to them. So we would urge you to put a donation as you exit in one of their donation boxes. If you missed your Christmas shopping because you came here tonight, we would welcome you to pick up a Christmas cake so that you will benefit the humanitarian mission. All proceeds will go to the mission. There's no administrative cost that we take off on any of the proceeds that we collect. And we do have Ajahn Brahm's book, Opening the Door of Your Heart, and if you'd like to purchase it and get it autographed, he will probably stay here till 10:30 tonight, or thereabouts. But please don't rush to the door to get the book. If you're interested in the book, what you do is you just form a line later on, and we will get them to bring the book to you. So that way you choke your place, and then there's no congestion at the door. I'd like to also announce that the Brahm Education Center, and there's no prize for guessing how we got the name Brahm Education Center. It was inspired by Ajahn Brahm's teachings. We will be offering meditation courses, so if you're interested in learning meditation in a proper way, we do have a teacher who used to be a monk, and he will be teaching the course, amongst other courses that will be available to you. I've also been asked to announce that the Buddhist Fellowship Youth Group would like to recruit you to join them as long as you are young at heart. We do have membership form within the Connection newsletter, which I do urge you to also pick up a copy so that you find out all the activities that are coming up, including the meditation retreat that Ajahn Brahm referred to. There's a membership form in there, and by signing up, you'll be kept informed of all the activities and events that we'll be holding in future. We will be launching the Rahula College for the young, and we do have some spaces left for secondary school students. So those of you who are parents or uncles or aunties and would like to introduce the gem of Buddhism to them at this early age, which is highly advisable, please register them early. Today we in fact have a press conference that involves Ajahn Brahm and the speaker who is representing the Muslims. They will be engaged in a dialogue at a gala dinner that we're organizing on the 30th December. We do have some tickets left, so if you're interested, it will be an event that we like to promote better understanding and building the bridge with the Muslims. And I think that we have a responsibility as Buddhists to reach out to the Muslims, to understand them better, and to also overcome any of the misunderstanding and misconception of their religion, which doesn't lead to a much healthy environment for us. So let's take the step forward together to do it. So with that, I wish you a very good evening, and I look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow and also on Thursday night. So please look out for the topics